What's going on, boys? My name is Moda, and today we'll be talking about the marksmanship specialization in the upcoming Shadowlands expansion. So this is going to be a discussion slash thoughts video where I go over some of the new abilities, the abilities we're getting back after the unpruning. We're going to talk about talents, covenants, and generally just the overall feel and how the spec plays. Now, before we get started, just a quick disclaimer, everything I discuss in this video today is subject to change, as we're in the tuning stage of the Shadowlands beta, and what may be relevant today may not be relevant for the weeks to come, so please keep that in mind. If you do, however, have any questions about what we talk about here today, I stream pretty much every day on Twitch at twitch.tv/ModaTV, so feel free to check me out over there and join in on the discussion. Now, without further ado, ladies and gents, let's get straight into it. Shadowlands has seen many iconic abilities return to the game in an attempt to unprune classes and bring back class identity. The first ability, and probably the most contentious for marks, is none other than Hunter's Mark. Hunter's Mark is essentially a set and forget ability that you put on a target that increases your damage dealt to the target by 5%. What it also does is it actually tracks the target for you as well. Now, the biggest problem with this ability is that it is, of course, on the GCD. So in an AoE situation, essentially re-hunters marking something after you've killed your initial target felt extremely bad. Almost as if it wasn't worth pressing in the first place. Now, I know what you're thinking, boys. Wow, Moda, that sucks. Yes, it does. What Blizzard have done now is they put it on a 20-second cooldown. And essentially, if the Hunter's Mark target dies, the cooldown of Hunter's Mark is reset. Now, I don't really know what the hell they were thinking with this one, but it's not too big of a deal. A scenario that I see that is going to be really shit is when essentially you pre-Hunter's Mark something and then the tank goes and pulls something else for whatever reason, and boom, you've wasted your Hunter's Mark. Anyway, I'm getting frustrated talking about this ability. Let's move on. Kill Shot, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, thank God. Kill Shot is back. What does that mean? Essentially, it means you get a baseline execute. At range. Very strong. I like it. Is it intuitive? Not really. You press it once every 10 seconds, but it's cool nonetheless. It's actually one of the only execute abilities that actually affects your rotation when you pair it with the new Deadeye talent, which I'll talk about later in the video. Now, the next ability we're going to talk about is none other than Eyes of the Beast. Now, this is one of the coolest abilities that hunters have. However, it has practically little to no use whatsoever. Essentially, you can see through the eyes of your pet for up to 1 minute. So, I could see this being used in, Goldshire Inn on Moonguard, possibly. That's about it. Alright, what's up next? Scare Beast. So this is essentially a fear on a beast for 20 seconds. It's very, very niche because it can only really be used when you're either questing or maybe in PvP. But unfortunately, yeah, it does only work on beasts, so it's pretty useless. Moving on. Trank Shot, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I'm so happy that this is coming back to our baseline toolkit because one of my biggest complaints with hunters in BFA was that too much of our utility was tied to our pets. So what this does essentially is is a ranged shot that removes 1 enrage and 1 magic effect from an enemy target. Alright, what's next? Binding Shot is now baseline for marksmanship hunters. So now this gives you the option to run post haste while retaining Binding Shot. Very good, I like it. So misdirection has been reworked to misdirect all threat you cause to the targeted party or raid member, beginning with your next attack within 30 seconds, lasting for 8 seconds. This is really good because it means you can MD all the way up to 30 seconds prior to actually pulling the pack, and it will still work. Essentially making the 8 seconds more worthwhile and effective. Now, something to note, while this is not that big of a deal for marksman, Revive Pet has been turned from a 2-second cast into a 6-second cast. Now, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is a clear violation of my hunter rights within World of Warcraft, and I will be having my solicitors contact Blizzard immediately. Actually insane. I'm just kidding, it's been taken down to 4 seconds. It's still dog shit though. Fix it! So about midway through the beta, Marksman's base abilities actually cost more focus in a recent iteration of Marksman, where aim shots focus cost was increased to 35 from 30, and arcane and multi-shots focus cost was increased to 20 from 15. Also, rapid fire was reworked. The duration was lowered to 2 seconds, was 3 seconds, and the total damage dealt by rapid fire was unchanged. So currently with the spec's main spenders costing more focus and its builder rapid fire, which does feel better to press, I might add since its update, generating less focus, Marksmanship is in a position where it's extremely focus hungry baseline to the point where even after pressing True Shot, it doesn't feel good to play. I can't express how frustrating it is to press Steady Shot, in some cases up to 3 times in a row just to be able to keep up. Anyway, now that we've talked about the abilities, let's talk about some talent changes. Alright, so midway through the beta, a variety of talents were redesigned to, as said by the developers, open up some diversity in talent choices, and even add some alternate 2-target cleave options without increasing action bar bloat. That second part in reference to Chimera Shot, which we'll talk about soon. Alright, let's take a look at the level 15 talent row. Master Marksman. This one is kind of a big deal because it's probably the biggest culprit for Marks being in such a focus-starved state at the moment. The old Master Marksman would give you guaranteed free arcane and multi-shots, whereas the new Master Marksman has been reined in to be similar in output to its competitors. So the new Master Marksman works as follows. Your ranged special attack critical strikes cause your target to bleed for an additional 15% damage over 6 seconds. So now that Master Marksman is not the go-to, essentially it opens us up to using Serpent Sting and Crows depending on whether they get the tuning right or not. Now Serpent Sting has been buffed. It still works the same as the old Serpent Sting, except now the duration has been increased to 18 seconds rather than 12. Alright, moving on. The level 25 talent row. So moving down the list, Careful Aim has now had the low health benefit removed in its execute phase, as it felt kind of redundant with kill shot returning. Additionally, the high health threshold has been lowered to 70% from 80%. Moving down the list, we've had a rework of Steady Focus as well, where using Steady Shot twice in a row increases your haste by 7% for 15 seconds. Streamline has also been redesigned to increase rapid fire damage by 15%, and rapid fire now also reduces the cast time of your next aim shot by 30%. So these are both good contenders for single target damage, absolutely. The third talent, however, is the one that is probably the most interesting. So now you have the option of taking Chim Shot. Chim Shot now replaces Arcane Shot in its new iteration. Chim Shot's cooldown has been reduced for Marksman Hunters, and it now has a focus cost of 20. Now when the game goes live, hopefully Chim Shot will be affected by all the passives that affected Arcane Shot. However, that currently is not the case. Hopefully that gets sorted before the game goes live. Alright, moving down the list, we have Lethal Shots. The proc chance of Lethal Shots has increased from 30%, was 20%. And last but not least, Deadeye. So what this does is it gives Kill Shot 2 charges and causes Aim Shot to recharge 50% faster. Now this definitely has a interesting single target interaction with the Venthia Covenant ability, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And finally, the return of Volley, ladies and gentlemen. So what this does is rain a volley of arrows down over 6 seconds, dealing up to 35% attack power. Anyway, who cares about the numbers? Physical damage to enemies in an area. Right? And what the best part about this talent is that you gain the trick shots effect for as long as the volley is active. Now, currently this is, I believe, a 6-second active time on volley. You can squeeze in 2 aim shots within that period. So what it does is essentially saves you GCDs on your multi-shots. Now, I think it's important to mention at this stage of the video as well, things like Barrage and Explosive Shot, they have had a target cap essentially added to them to align them with, you know, the nature of Shadowlands. Explosive Shot does damage up to 6 targets, and Barrage is capped at 8. And finally, lock and loads proc chances being increased from 8% was 5%. So Marksman has definitely had a lot of talents that have been reworked a little bit, which again should sort of open you up to have more options in your selection, which can only be a good thing, right? All right, boys, you know what time it is. Legendaries are back. And let me tell you, Marksman's got some good ones. Now, there are a lot of legendaries that are sort of specific to niche situations like Torghast and PvP. I'm not really going to be talking about those. I'm just going to touch upon the ones that will affect our sort of single target AoE rotation, the ones that are sort of specific to hunters as well. The first of those being Call of the Wild. Now what this does, this is based off of the Legion legendary, and all this does is reduce the cooldown of all your aspects by 25% rather than 35%, which is what it was in Legion. This can be good in, you know, maybe later down the track. In my testing, it hasn't really been that good. True Shot has kind of lost value for me now that everything costs so much focus. However, it is still one of the better legendaries and synergizes really well with talents such as Calling the Shots and Conduits such as Sharpshooter's Focus. Okay, Nesingwary's Trapping Apparatus. Whenever a trap is triggered, gain 25 focus. Yeah, this is Bin. Next. Alright, so this is a very interesting legendary that's recently gone through some nerfs. Soulforge Embers. So launching a flare into your tar trap causes all enemies inside of the tar trap to burn for 210% attack power fire damage over 12 seconds. Now this thing got nerfed by about 900% on launch. It was currently, well, in its first iteration it was uncapped, obviously, as it is now. However, it did some bonkers damage. I'm talking it was doing 60-70% of your breakdown. It was actually insane what this thing could do. But yeah, they've definitely pretty much nerfed that into obliteration. The sort of the interaction is pretty cool. I do like the aspect of using tar trap and then flaring on top. That's great. But what you found, it was pretty much essentially an extra 2 sequences in your opener, right? So you found like it sort of felt like you were pressing 7-8 buttons before you were doing damage. It really didn't feel too good to use. All right, Craven Stratagem. Feign Death cooldown reduced by 15 seconds, and Feign Death now removes most negative status effects from yourself. Now, I'm not even going to go into it. Yeah, I'm not even going to go into it. Alright, so those are all the hunter-wide legendaries that will be available to all 3 specs. Now let's take a look at some of the MM-specific legendaries. Alright, so we have Eagleton's True Focus. True Shot also reduces the focus cost of all your abilities by 30%. Now prior to Blizzard changing the focus cost of all our abilities, this legendary didn't do that much because we were able to fully execute a True Shot without even casting a single steady shot. Now that is not the case, so it has definitely become more relevant and definitely has a place as a single target option. Alright, the next legendary is Surging Shots. So Rapid Fire deals 15% additional damage, and Aim Shot has 15% chance to reset the cooldown of Rapid Fire. Now this legendary makes Rapid Fire feel relevant and is actually surprisingly one of our best single target options. It does kind of feel bad though sitting there praying for Rapid Fire procs so that you can actually play the game and not have to spam steady shot. Okay, Secrets of the Unblinking Vigil. When you gain the Trick Shot's effect, you have a 50% chance for it not to be consumed by your next Aim Shot or Rapid Fire. I don't like this just because, again, you're leaving so much of your rotation up to chance, right? And just like having to wait to see if your Trick Shot gets consumed. I'm not a fan of it personally, but you know. Alright, last but not least, Serpent Stalker's Trickery. When Aim Shot hits multiple targets from the Trick Shot's effect, 3 enemies struck by the Aim Shot also get hit by an Arcane Shot. Now this legendary synergizes extremely well with our new Volley talent, and even is affected by things like Double Tap, Precise Shots, powerful Precision Conduits, and is currently the funnest legendary that I've been testing a lot in the beta. It also works with Chimera Shot, and it even makes our 2-target much more relevant. Overall, this legendary was very, very well designed. Alright boys, next up is Covenant abilities, one of the main features and staples of Shadowlands. And first up is the Venthia, ladies and gentlemen. Venthia gives you an ability called Flayed Shot. Now what this does is it fires a shot at an enemy which causes them to bleed, so it's like a dot over 20 seconds, and each time it ticks, it gives you a 15% chance to gain Flayer's Mark. What this does is it causes your next kill shot to be used on any target, regardless of their current health. Now, this ability has a very, very cool interaction with the Deadeye talent. So if you remember, kill shot has two charges, and causes aim shot to recharge 50% faster for 3 seconds. So it kind of fixes that issue where, you're stuck not having aim shot charges. Now this had a lot of potential to be a very, very cool interaction. The problem with this now, as it currently stands, is that kill shot actually costs you focus. And whenever you recharge your aim shots, you actually don't have enough focus to spend them. It's so frustrating. Also, as a Venthia, you will gain access to the Door of Shadows ability, which is a teleport and can be nice situationally, and definitely gives us a bit of added utility to our toolkit. Alright, next up we have the Night Fae. So you will gain the Wild Spirits ability, which evokes the energy of wild spirits at the target location, applying Wild Mark to all enemy targets within the area for 15 seconds. While the wild spirits are active, each damaging ability you use against a target affected by the wild mark strikes the target for nature damage. Now, currently this is the hardest one to test. And that's because of the fact that while most of the other Covenant abilities seem to be implemented, Wild Spirits seems to be unfinished. The ability itself works and is usable, but many of our abilities don't interact with it properly. So for example, Trick Shots does not work. It procs off the initial hit of Rapid Fire, but doesn't proc off the 7 hits that we have in our Rapid Fire. It currently doesn't proc off Serpent Sting. Currently, it's just not in a place where I've been testing it too much because, as I said, there's just too many bugs. I don't necessarily think it's going to be that good anyway, so I'm okay with that. Now, as a Night Fae, you will gain access to Soul Shape. Now, utility-wise, Soul Shape is probably one of the best Covenant options that we have. It's an on-demand blink, and you get added movement speed, which definitely helps positioning. And when you pair it with Disengage and Aspect, it's like some of the best movement in the game, right? Alright, next up, the Necrolord. So you'll gain access to Death Chakram. Now this is one of the cooler looking hunter abilities, and basically what you do is you throw a chakram at your current target that would rapidly bounce and deal damage up to 7 times. Now this will hit one enemy 7 times or bounce between enemies 7 times. Now while the damage of the ability itself is quite underwhelming, each time the chakram bounces and does damage, you actually gain 3 focus per tick. Now this kind of helps fill the void of the lack of focus that the Marksman spec receives, which is actually putting it as the #1 or one of the top contenders right now for Marksmanship Hunter. Now, as a Necrolord, you will gain access to the Fleshcraft ability, which is essentially a 4-second channeled 50% absorb shield. Now, this is very strong, particularly for hunters, because they've always lacked survivability. So having that extra defensive capability is going to be very strong, particularly in all types of content, right? Raiding, Mythic Plus, on those end bosses, even PvP, because you can charge it up, obviously, before the arena starts, right? And last but not least, the Kyrian. Now this is my personal favorite Covenant, aesthetically and lore-wise. And as a Kyrian hunter, you will gain access to Resonating Arrow. So what this does is it fires an arrow at the location for 10 seconds. It's basically like a ring on the ground. The effect causes your attacks to ignore line of sight, so extremely good for PvP, to enemies in the area. Now, any enemy that sits within your Resonating Arrow, you will have a 30% increased critical strike chance against. Now, when you pair that with the nature of Marksman's Burst AoE, the damage is insane. As a Kyrian, you will also receive Summon Steward, and what this does is it calls a Steward to bring you a Vial of Serenity that can be consumed to restore 20% health and remove all curse, disease, poison, and bleed effects. Now, I know it seems extremely underwhelming, but it's actually not. This potion flat out cures necrotic, grievous, all, like, pretty much most of the new poisons, diseases, and bleeds that are introduced in the new dungeons, which is going to be extremely useful for Mythic Plus. Even some of the raid dots that people are, like, thinking about rolling Dwarf for can flat out be removed by this potion. And it also doesn't share a cooldown with your health bot or your on-use pot. Now, I've already been asked 100 times, Moda, what covenant do I pick for Shadowlands? I just don't know what to pick. Look, in my honest opinion, pick what you want to play. You're going to have a better time doing it, right? It's going to be a better experience. If you really want my recommendation, if you pick Necrolord or Kyrian, you're going to do just fine. Don't hold me to that though, because like I said, we're in the tuning phase. That could change the day after I record this video. The last thing I want to talk about is Conduits. Conduits are like a sort of locked in talent system, which you can only change week to week. They are bound to specific soulbinds, which are like characters that you'll be unlocking as you progress through the Covenant campaign, which give you access to a talent tree type system that's also like a cross with the Legion relic system, if you remember that one. Now, while Conduits are very, very powerful in nature and probably one of the most influencing facts as to whether your spec is going to scale well, I am in fact going to gloss over this because currently in the current state of beta, it's actually probably the most unfinished system. There are a lot of conduits that are just flat out not working as intended, or the interactions just don't work at all. Also, we actually don't know how we are going to be acquiring the leveled up versions of the conduits as well, or whether the scaling of each level of conduit is even correct. Alright, so first up we have the Covenant Hunter Potency Soulbind Conduits in Shadowlands, and I'm not going to go into these. Basically, I'll leave them up on the screen so you guys can have a look if you want to suss that out. They're not too important, they're just slight buffs to your Covenant abilities. Alright, next up we have the Marksmanship Hunter Potency Conduits. So, Brutal Projectiles is essentially your auto attacks have 10% chance to cause your next rapid fire to deal 1% increased damage for each shot. That obviously scales up with conduit level. We have Deadly Chain, which essentially means that your trick shot secondary damage will increase by 10% all the way up to 25% when we unlock that. Powerful Precision, which is precise shots increases the damage of your next arcane or multi-shot by an additional 5%. I imagine this will work with Chimera Shot when they fix that. And last but not least, Sharpshooter's Focus, which means that True Shot will last 20% longer, scaling all the way up to 50. So when you combine all of these conduits on top of the abilities that we have, right, you can see how much like damage you're going to be able to put out whenever you're hitting those max level conduits. Now, I don't know whether that's at the end of this patch, I don't know whether that's at the end of the expansion. I have no idea. Nobody does. Currently, we have no idea how we're going to be scaling these conduits up. I will lastly leave up the endurance conduits as well as the finesse conduits as well, so you guys can take a look if you want. Alright boys, now I'm just going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the spec. How does it feel, right? How does it keep up? Is it good enough? I feel like the spec's always sort of been in this sort of limbo area where it doesn't know what it wants to be. Don't get me wrong, marksmanship is currently performing very well on the beta at the moment. While normally this would be great, in my opinion, dealing damage doesn't equate to feeling good. And you can see that Blizzard are trying to fix it, right? But unfortunately, they're trying to fix it with borrowed power again, instead of taking steps to rework the spec from the ground up. Like they add conduits such as the Powerful Precision Conduit and the Brutal Projectiles one, which, you know, essentially are designed to try and fix precise shots, rapid fire. It's just, I don't understand. I wouldn't be opposed as to Blizzard removing rapid fire completely. It does, you know, next to no damage and the focus generation is minimal at best. It's just a button that I feel like I just don't want to press. Another decision that I feel has basically led to the downfall of Marksman as well is obviously having the 2 charges of aim shot. My suggestion would be to remove the charges and then sort of try to find depth in some sort of other way to really, you know, amp up the spec. Whether that's through a baseline dot or, you know, a damage window, a vulnerability window, something like that, as we've seen in the past. Potentially even a hit combo-esque type system that you see on the Windwalker Monk. Again, I'm not a game designer, so I don't know. At the end of the day, I'm still going to play this spec. It's currently performing better than BM. Is it as fun? I don't think so. But I can definitely see down the line there is potential for some like true shot reduction builds and stuff like that when we see our conduits level up. I feel like in an AoE situation, you're not really going to find a lot of the issues of marksman, right? The fact that you have a volley window feels great. You're doing extreme amounts of burst AoE damage, and that kind of masks the fact that, you know, there are flaws in the rotation. The fact that you're also getting extra utility, such as, you know, trank shot, binding shot, I think it's going to be a good choice in Mythic Plus, and I think you're going to have a lot of fun with it. I have no qualms with its AoE aspect. It's so sad because, like, in WoD, like, MM was one of the best specs that, you know, ever existed in WoW, right? Legion. MM. It had its vulnerability window, right? It had so much interaction. Okay, it gave you a mini game to play within your rotation. It was so good, right? Trying to squeeze that extra aim shot in. It didn't have charges. It felt good to press. Now it's like MM is just like, press your biggest damage abilities, you know, as much as you can, and that's it, right? And you can't even do that properly because you don't have enough focus. It just feels so bad. Now, the only thing that can really help you with this is like the Necrolord ability, which again, like, it's a boring ability, let me tell you. You just press it and it gives you focus. It does a little bit of damage. That's it. It's more of a philosophical conversation to have. Like, ever since the introduction of borrowed power, like, yeah, it's been easy to wipe and rescale things from expansion to expansion, but it's honestly just made, I feel like it's just lazy class design. I mean, it is refreshing to play because it's new, and I've been playing BM for, you know, the past, the whole of BFA pretty much, but I don't know what to tell you, boys. I think the spec is flawed, and I think they could do better. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, boys. Yeah? You will do as you please. I provided the information. I hope you enjoyed it. Outside of some minor concerns, I am so excited for Shadowlands and just to have something fresh, you know, something to be, you know, looking forward to, just because, like I said, we've all had it pretty rough in BFA, and let's hope for bigger and better things, boys. I feel like this is going to be a great expansion. And if you have any questions about what we've talked about today, like I said, boys, I stream at twitch.tv/MotorTV, so feel free to pop down and ask me a question, and I'll hopefully get those answers for you. Anyway, take care for now. Thank you for watching the video. I appreciate your time. Thanks, guys.